Welcome, everyone, to this evening's July 24th program with Tom Ufert, author, political commentator, and announced presidential candidate. Global-Newsmaker-Focus is broadcast now on Fridays from 9 to 10:30 p.m. Eastern on United Public Radio and UPRN 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, and 107.9 FM and 105.3 FM, Pass Christian, Mississippi. Hello to my great host, Brunel, who's joining us. Also, special shout-out to Ben Childs and Will Turner of Ben Childs and Associates, Aaron Perna, and John Barrios with Group Nightfall. Tonight, Brunel and I, Patrice Sheridan speaking, will be discussing Tom Ufert's decision to announce as a presidential candidate and Tom's opinions on current social, political, and foreign policy developments. We want to learn what prompted Tom's decision to serve as a presidential candidate and what are the purposes of his campaign. We want to hear Tom Ufert's stand on the issues. Now, the call-in number to the station for our listeners is 504-273-7379. Again, 504-273-7379. Also, Brunel and I want to note Tom's biography details for the listeners who are not aware of them. And also, if anyone is having for very easy access to the direct stream for United Public Radio, go to the website, Global-Newsmaker-Focus.com, Global-Newsmaker-Focus.com. And, of course, listeners will definitely want to visit Tom's website, which is at Tom Ufert, TOMUFERT.com. Now, let's see. Biography details, very impressive. Tom Ufert is an inspirational voice in our troubled times. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and History as a scholarship recipient from the Centenary College of Louisiana. Tom is a former Rotary International Graduate Fellow who attended Australian National University in Canberra, ACT, specializing in East Asian political affairs, and was a White House Fellow nominee. He is a former Lyndon Baines Johnson congressional intern and constituency aide for two former United States members of Congress. His past services for 11 political campaigns on both sides of the aisle were highly valued by former Louisiana Governor Charles Buddy Romer Henson Moore, the former Assistant Chief of Staff to U.S. Vice President George H.W. Bush, and the recently retired U.S. Trade Ambassador Ron Kirk. At age 23, he was the youngest artistic board chairman in the United States as head of the Shreveport Summer Music Festival. Mr. Ufert has served as a member of two other 501c3 charity boards, including his beloved fraternity, Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia, as well as the Community Advisory Board for his former rehabilitation hospital. Over the years, he has acquired extensive customer service experience in the food and beverage, hotel, insurance, home security, and pharmaceutical industries. His professional memberships include Phi Alpha Theta, Sigma Tau Delta, and the worldwide Who's Who. In recent years, he has worked tirelessly as a volunteer fundraiser for numerous AIDS charities in his community and served briefly as the Community Affairs Liaison for Legacy Founders Cottage. Tom Ufert, a native of Louisiana, now resides in Texas. He is an Amazon best-selling author for his second book, On the Roll Again. His first book, Adversity Builds Character, received high acclaim with numerous 5-star reviews, as has his recent release, Political Craps. His most recent book, Tom's Take, published this January, has attracted much favorable attention. Tom's radio program of the same name, Tom's Take, which debuted April 29, 2015 on Blog Talk Radio, has gained a substantial listening audience. 4 of Tom's books and several of his essay booklets have garnered distinction as among Amazon's top 20 bestsellers. This year, Tom Ufert received the Best Nonfiction Award from Titan Publishing House. Perhaps Mr. Ufert's greatest claim to fame is that every book he sells contributes directly to charity through his charitable book entity, Stand Strong for Others. Now, Tom's website can be found at Tom Ufert, TOMUFERT.com. His Facebook page can be found at Tom Ufert Author. And look for the website soon to be posted at tomufert.org for Tom's position papers on the important issues, including foreign policy. Well, now I'm so excited. I hope you can hear us well. What a great guest. Interesting information, I'm sure.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. Welcome back, Tom. It's wonderful to have you as our guest again. And we are very interested in your announcement and some of the platform you want to present to us. So without further ado.
Well,
Patrice, Janelle, I want to thank you very much for having me on the show again and the opportunity to get my message out for the upcoming 2016 presidential campaign. Before I begin, however, I would like to send my thoughts and prayers to my fellow Louisianian brothers in Lafayette and the community there for the recent shooting that happened yesterday. My heart really goes out to that community. Louisiana is my home, and I felt deeply moved that happened in such a wonderful community. So my thoughts and prayers go up to Lafayette.
And I'd like to add that we all here share your sentiments as well. We echo the request for prayers and guidance at this time. It is very, very sad.
Yes, definitely. Having said that, Memorial Day this year, I announced my independent candidacy for President of the United States. Now, they can go and find my announcement video and my first campaign video on YouTube. Just type in my name. Our campaign website will be up next month at tomufert.org. But the first thing I need to make perfectly clear about my candidacy is that this is more of a special interest campaign because this is known as the None of the Above campaign, and it's spelled N-O-T-U. And we misspelled above to be spelled U-B-O-V-E for the purposes of having my initials in it so that people would recognize it. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to give the voters an alternative to the main party candidates and offer them the chance to vote none of the above for any of the presidential candidates in the 2016 election. And with rumors of Donald Trump jumping in as a possible third-party independent, it makes this campaign even more important. And the reason I'm doing this is because I think, like most Americans, we are fed up and we are sick and tired of career politicians who do nothing but raise money and constantly run for re-election. And this is an opportunity for the American people to show their dissatisfaction and cast their votes. There are 44 states in the country that allow write-in ballots, and every one of those states we will be working steadfastly to get this campaign on the ballot as none of the above.
Very, very impressive. Now, Tom, am I correct that your campaign will not accept PAC or corporate contributions and will only accept personal citizen donations that are less than $100, and the monies received will be distributed to the poor and needy?
That is correct. This campaign is primarily focused on campaign finance reform. We will not accept any PAC money. We will not set up a super PAC as allowed under Citizens United. We will not accept any corporate donations, and all contributions to the campaign are limited to personal donations of $100 or less. Now, at the end of the campaign, when all of the expenses are paid out, any campaign donations that are still left over in the Treasury will be donated to feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, and taking care of the disabled. And I put out a press release challenging every other presidential campaign out there to do the same thing, and of course have had no takers. Not that I'm surprised, but that stresses to the American voters, one, my campaign has nothing to gain. Two, your money is going to good causes. And three, I stated in my campaign announcement that even if this campaign wins, I will refuse to accept the office. And people say, well, then why should we support you? Why are you running if you're going to refuse to accept the office? And the sentiment is this. If we vote for none of the above, and that includes me as a candidate, then the voters have the opportunity to create a constitutional crisis that will force a new election and will force the real people to choose realistic candidates that are not out for their own self-interest. And I think that would send a reverberating shockwave through the American political system, and it would create a massive civilian voter revolution to make it clear to our present political elite, we've had enough, and enough is enough.
Very strong points there. Now, Tom, in your work and in your announcements, you've referenced that you believe this upcoming presidential election will be of extreme importance, particularly in the shaping of foreign and domestic policy and agendas for several years' time. You consider yourself to be, and you are, a very dedicated, and I'm quoting you, a dedicated and loyal citizen who believes in change for this country. Your comments on this?
Definitely. I consider the 2016 presidential campaign probably one of the most consequential of our lifetimes. You saw the consequences of the campaign in 1980 between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. You saw the consequences of the 1960 election between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. Those are all consequential generational elections. And I am a firm believer that the 2016 election is of that consequential importance. The reason I say that is because for the last 3.5 decades, we have lived under the political, I guess, dominance. And I caution when I say the word dominance because I want that to be too strong a word. But the major dominance of two political families in this country, the Bushes and the Clintons, as represented by the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think the American people and the nation need a new vision, and we need new voices out there. We need citizen legislators and not career politicians. When you look at the public opinion polls now, and you see that both political parties have the highest dissatisfaction rate that have been recorded in 20 years since they started recording dissatisfaction rates. The preeminent nominee to be for the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, has a very high unfavorability rate for trusting her. The leading candidate for the Republicans, and I say this with great chagrin, is presently Donald Trump, with Jeb Bush close behind. My predictions in my book, Political Craps, were that it would be Bush and Clinton again. So I think it's time that we need to break this shackle of these two dynasties and move forward. And we need to do that to get this country back on the road again to prosperity and peace.
Very powerful comments there. Now, you've often spoken out, Tom, against lawmaker apathy, also citizen apathy, the negative effects of big business and lobbyist influence on our legislators and other elected officials, the revolving door aspect of lawmakers then becoming lobbyists.
Yes.
And also, you're very strong, I was going to say, an opponent of the Citizens United versus Hodges case. I know you've written at great length about it. You very much want to curtail the power of the lobbyists.
Definitely. And my campaign position papers, when they come out next month, one of the things that my campaign will be proposing is that presently the revolving door restriction is, I believe, 2 to 4 years. I want to extend that to 10 years. I believe that we need to have a constitutional amendment that overturns Citizens United, and there's strong public support out there for this, and we need to really pursue this very heavily. We've got to get big money out of the political realm if we are going to regain control for the people of this country. We have, in America today, we are more concentrated on what divides us rather than what unites us. And our political leadership has fed into that as well. When you've got the Democrats and the Republicans playing the blame game, and no one is answering the questions and solving the problems that the American people need. We do not have any legislation out there that has any hope of passing for job creation. We do not have any legislation for tax reform. And my campaign has some very definite opinions about tax reform. We have no legislation that has any hope of passing until after the election for immigration reform. And Donald Trump's racist, xenophobic statements against immigration they disgust me. And I think that even though Americans are frustrated, they're looking to someone who's out there trying to speak the truth. And Donald Trump is not the answer. But at the same time, I don't see a lot of other candidates that are doing it either. And they're looking for fresh voices. They're looking for people that will stop doing the Washington two-step, will answer their questions, and offer concrete solutions to their problems.
Very, very informative. Your recent posting at your blog site at tomufert.com has an essay entitled "American Politics Needs American Politics Needs an Enema," with very interesting commentary on Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and others. But now, it also contains some very intriguing facts on presidential elections. You note that, in quoting you, the factual truth is that political campaigns are won or lost in the last 2 weeks of an election cycle. As Americans, we have a very short political memory, end quote. Of course, we had the first Republican debate on August 6th in Cleveland, Ohio. But now, for example, regarding the Donald, there are some journalists now, some media people saying that he might be striking a chord there at a central segment of the American voters. Do you think he might have lasting power in this election campaign?
I think he does, and if nothing else, it's because of his wealth. He has lasting campaign stamina because he can afford to stay in, whereas other candidates who need to raise money independently cannot. The sad part about it is that Donald Trump's bloated and heavily leveraged wealth that he says is approximately $10 billion. I saw a news report 2 days ago from a local NBC station here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that their accounting experts went through it very heavily and demonstrated that what he says is $10 billion is approximately $1.8 billion. Even so, he's a billionaire. He's got lots of money. But he's a successful businessman. It doesn't mean he would be a successful leader for the country. I honestly consider that his approach and leadership style is more dictatorial than it is bridging the gaps and uniting people. And what he's doing is he's appealing to the fears of this country, and he's not answering questions. He was in Laredo yesterday and was constantly pegged for what were his facts and his policy proposals for solving the border immigration problem. And he wouldn't answer them. He constantly changed the subject. And this needs to be confronted, because if he can't answer the questions and put solid facts and details in policy proposals on the table, then he's not someone that the American people needs to put their trust behind. He is a snake charmer, and I don't think the American people are as stupid as he seems to think they are. I believe that, yes, he will have lasting stamina in this election, but I think in the end, the American voters are going to decide that he is not the answer they're looking for.
You know, Tom, this might put you on the spot, but do you think that Donald Trump will choose the independent option?
It would not surprise me, because Donald Trump is one of these people. You know, when I heard that comment that he gave to the Hill newspaper day before yesterday, and he cited the fact that the Republican National Committee was not being very nice to him. And it immediately brought up an imagery of a spoiled little brat taking his toys and going home. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if he decided to run as an independent, which, as an independent voter, really gives me a bad name and leaves a foul taste in my mouth. And considering that independent voters are the fastest growing growing block of voters in the country, I saw a survey about 2.5 weeks ago that showed that independent voters were within 2 percentage points of being the largest block of voters, even more so than Republicans and Democrats combined. And when you consider the primary process, you've got both Democrats and Republicans appealing to their fringe groups of their parties so they can get elected and win the nominations of their party. Then they flip-flop and move more towards the center so that they can appeal to independent voters. Well, our campaign doesn't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about primary situations. We don't have to worry about fringe groups. We're telling it exactly like it is, and we're opening it up for independent voters to have a way to protest vote against the corrupt system that we have at this moment. And Donald Trump's a perfect example of what's wrong with the political system in this country.
No, those are very informative points there. Now, you know, in your latest essay, you have an excellent discussion there on Hillary Clinton. Did I understand correctly that you really believe, of course, she has wonderful education, service in government, but do you think that she's really being catapulted also because of the fact that she is a woman, that the Democrats believe it is time to have a female candidate for president?
I think that is a strong incentive, okay? Hillary Clinton is a very talented and dedicated public servant, don't get me wrong. But I think that voters would be making a huge mistake if they voted for her just because she is the most likely, probable first woman president in American history. That is not a reason to vote for someone. Too often, voters, and especially within the partisan structure, they vote for or they nominate someone because it's their time, or because they've been around and they deserve the opportunity. Well, that's not the right reason to vote for somebody. And I encourage primary voters to really seriously question why they're voting for someone. Bernie Sanders has been making some wonderful statements. He's generating crowds, but he's not going to get the nomination for the Democrats. He just doesn't have the ability to do that the way the partisan primary structure is set up. Hillary Clinton is in all probability going to be the Democratic nominee. I like Jim Webb of Virginia, and always have. But I also like John Kasich out of Ohio for the Republicans. These are wonderful individuals that, let's say, if I were to win the election and I had the physical stamina to be president of the United States, these are all individuals I would invite to be in my cabinet. And the reason I say that is because Franklin Delano Roosevelt was criticized when he came into power for having a cabinet of such divisive and differing opinions. And he responded to those criticisms by saying, no, I get a well-rounded perspective of differing opinions that I can sift through and create the best answer to solve this country's problems. And that's the problem nowadays. We don't have enough bridging of the gaps, moderates who are willing to work together and cross party lines to solve the problems of this country. And that's because the way the partisan structure is set up, they have been forced out of the system by the fringe groups. And that's not what this country is about. And I find it extremely undemocratic.
Very intriguing. Well, you know, Tom, for example, on a currently very divisive issue, illegal immigration, you mentioned some political pandering on this issue, I believe on both sides of the aisle, correct? You know, I would think a Republican candidate, yeah, I'm sorry, Tom, go right ahead.
No, yes, I have said that there's pandering on both sides. The Democrats, you know, with the Obama elections, they captured most of the Hispanic vote. And the Hispanic population is extremely frustrated because there has not been any movement on immigration reform. And so they look at the Democratic Party and they think they're being taken for granted. The Republican Party has basically pushed them out completely. And when you have, you know, Romney's campaign slogan was self-deportation, and you now have Republicans who are scrambling over themselves to try and rebrand themselves as the party that would appeal to the Latino community. The fastest growing political bloc in this country is wrangling its hands because it doesn't see promise on either side. And evident is the fact that we had promises for the last 6 years that there would be immigration reform, and nothing has happened. There's not even any movement on it. And you have Hillary's statement a couple of weeks ago on immigration reform, where she wants to create a pathway to citizenship. And you have Republicans who are saying that that's basically amnesty. But why can't we have a compromise? Why can't we have a system? And I agree with Donald Trump on one aspect of this. He says the reason that we have so much immigration coming into this country is because they're coming here because the jobs are here. All right? Part of that problem is the e-verification system needs to be national and it needs to be enforced, which means if an employer hires someone who is undocumented, they are fined or they're arrested for it. And that needs to be a nationwide system. There also needs to be a paid fee for visa program. Now, I've done quite a bit of research in the last several months on this subject, and one of the things that has a lot of support and academic response to is the H-1 visa extensions for particular industries. And what employers would do is they would hire people who have work visas, but they would pay a fee for that. So it would encourage them, if these are the kinds of employees that they need and they can't find them in the domestic workforce, that they would have to pay a fee for that. But it would also help pay for immigration reform and would help with border security, would help fund that. Now, you know, one of the things that cracks me up about Donald Trump building the Great Wall, you know, on the southern border, you know, and as I wrote in my blog about it this week, the Berlin Wall didn't stop freedom-loving East Germans from trying to get to the West. And the Great Wall that the Israelis are building to keep out Palestinian terrorism isn't working. So what makes the American voters think that another wall on our southern border is going to stop this? That's not the problem. The problem is we need to stop the incentives for them to come here. And we need to fix the broken system for the 11 million undocumented that are here. And that's my approach. And when my campaign proposals come out next month, I will detail and outline this in extreme fashion. Because when you've got someone like Donald Trump out there who's throwing these 30-second tidbits that appeal to people's fears and calls all of the immigrants coming across the border in waves, as Fox News says, 100,000s a day, which is not true, and they're all rapists and murderers and drug dealers, that's not true either. You're not dealing with facts, and that's part of the problem. We're dealing with fears, and it's a terrible way for the American voters to be appealed to, but it works. It's negative campaigning, and it works. But I'm hoping that the American people will use their brains and will do the research they need to do to find the right answers to this and vote for people that will pursue this kind of legislation.
Those are very innovative points. I'll tell you, I have a question here. I've been several Republican candidates very much impressed me. One of them being Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. Do you think where he is so strongly fluent in the Spanish, he's also very, very knowledgeable in foreign relations, national security, and other matters, do you think that he might represent really a very positive candidate to the Hispanic voters?
I think he does, because he's giving voice. He was one of the first Republicans to give voice for immigration reform, and you saw how his party harangued him for it, and it's been a problem for him. And now with Trump sucking all of the air out of the campaign, voices like that can't propose real legislation that can offer solutions. Marco Rubio is a young, vibrant voice in this country, and I think he's got some great ideas. I think he's a bit too young. I mean, we've seen what happens when an individual who only served 2 years in the U.S. Senate becomes president. President Obama was a senator for 2 years, then ran for president and became president. And even President Obama just weeks ago in his interviews admitted, look, I've made mistakes. I've learned from them. But now that I don't have another election to worry about, I'm fearless. My concern is that if we have individuals that are just coming up as a new vision and a new voice without the experience that they need, this should not be an on-the-job training for the presidency. But that, when you look at the realities of politicians and people who win the presidency, it's an on-the-job training. I understand that. But I think we need some people with a little bit more experience. I don't know who that would be. I am not going to say that I have all the answers, because I don't. And anybody who thinks that I do, don't vote for me, because they're voting for the wrong reason. No one running in this election has all the answers, but we need people who are willing to come together and bring differing voices together to make compromises and come up with solutions.
Tom, you have excellent points there for your proposed platform issues, elements here. I'm going now to probably next to last page of my notes, of both Brunel and my notes are joint notes, Brunel and mine. Now, some of your proposals, well, for example, you're very strongly in favor of freedom of speech and civil liberties. You want to promote ethics in politics, straight talks. You're also for tax code reform. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Fair Tax Act in both the House and the Senate submitted by Republicans. Would you like that idea of a flat tax?
I throw the idea of a flat tax out there to start a conversation. Mm-hmm. I am no economist. I am no economist. I'll be the first to admit that. But I throw it out there. I throw it out there for people to consider. One of the proposals that I will be making in tax reform. Right now, the United States has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world, and I believe it's 37.1%. My proposal to start a conversation is that we have 3 tax brackets for corporations. One would be 15%, one would be 20%, one would be 25%. Would make us extremely competitive with other countries in the world. It would help companies repatriate their funds from foreign banks, and would have to help them repatriate jobs in this country. Mm-hmm. And the way that would be broken down to is the 15% would be for companies that have 50 employees or less. For companies that have 51 to 250 employees, they would have a 20% rate. And for companies with more than 250 employees, they would have a 25% rate. We'd get rid of a bunch of the loopholes. In my research that I'm working on regarding the budget, I don't think most Americans realize it, but the loopholes and the tax breaks that our corporations get, if you were to collect all of that money together for the 2015 budget, you would have completely erased the deficit of this country. That is how much money the government is giving away to corporations, and that's outrageous.
That's really amazing.
It is. Now, if I may, Patrice, I just got a note here from one of my supporters that wanted me to bring this up. You bring up civil liberties, and one of the things that I'm very proud of that I have not mentioned yet, I am the only candidate running for president that is physically challenged and is openly gay. And I bring that up because I want people to take those things into consideration. I'll be the first to admit that I may be physically challenged and I may be openly gay, but those are not what define me. I am not, even though I am gay, being gay is not all that I'm about. Being physically challenged is not all that I'm about. Franklin Delano Roosevelt served this country for 4 terms, more than any other U.S. president, brought us out of the Great Depression, and helped us through World War II, and he was in a wheelchair. Now, having said that, I am in complete support of the Supreme Court's backing of same-sex marriage because it is a civil liberty. It has nothing to do with morality. And people who have moral objections to it do not have to take part in it. That was part of Justice Kennedy's decision when he read it, is that people who have moral objections do not have to take part in it. But because marriage licenses are issued by the state and by government agencies, it is an affront to civil liberties in this country to deny people who love each other and are committed to each other, as my partner and I have been for 15 years, the same protections and rights that married couples who are straight have. And that's the reason I support that. Now, there are several legislative efforts going on across this country. Here in Texas, our own new governor and attorney general encouraged local county registrars not to issue those licenses. And I say, go for it. If that's what you want to do, be my guest. But I can guarantee you that they will not get past the federal superior court because it is unconstitutional for them to do that. And one of the things that I am a big proponent of, I have HIV. I have been a survivor of HIV for 23 years now. My health is in perfect health. I just had my doctor's visit, and I have a detailed health report. I have 3 disabilities. I have multiple sclerosis, I have an incomplete spinal fracture, and I have HIV that I have had for all 3 for the last 23 years. My MS is in remission or at least stagnation. My side effects from my spinal fracture are completely controlled with medication. My HIV is non-detectable and has been for the last 5 years thanks to medication. My T cells are back to normal. One of the things that I am going to be really pushing with this campaign and years after this is why are people who are now surviving HIV allowed to get life insurance for them and their families. That is a disgrace, and it's something that I think we need to address because I think it is a civil liberties violation, and it's something that I want to really push. So I've gotten off my soapbox, and I hope I haven't derailed your questions. So.
Not at all. Now, listen, Tom, I have to say, Vernell and I always enjoy hearing your comments. You're probably one of the most highly intelligent and informed people we've met here on radio and also in the media as a journalist and author. Now, I personally was not too happy. I disagreed, rather, with the Obergefell versus Hodges case. But now, quoting the SCOTUS site, the Supreme Court of the United States site, citing directly, the holding was the 14th Amendment requires a state to license a marriage between two people of the same sex and to recognize a marriage between two people of the same sex when their marriage was lawfully licensed and performed out of state, end quote. And indeed, it has caused a great deal of controversy. But now, Tom, quick question here. Do you ever see the situation escalating where Governor Greg Abbott's executive order that would protect ministers not wishing to officiate at same-sex marriages might indeed be necessary? Can you see such division among the country to that point?
I can understand that division. I can understand the assertion that religiously minded individuals have, and they declare that this is a redefinition of marriage. I understand that, and I will be more than happy to sit down with them, and we can agree to disagree. But the fact that Justice Kennedy's majority opinion specifically said that people who have moral objections to this are not required to officiate, are not required to have business involved with the officiating of a same-sex marriage. That is their right and their privilege. However, as a government official that county registrars are, because they issue the licenses for marriage as ordained by law, they are required, regardless of their religious or political inclinations, to issue those licenses without discrimination. This was the same argument that was argued with interracial marriages 5 decades ago, and it is no different. And I can understand someone having a moral objection to it, but if they have a moral or political objection in performing the duties that they have been duly elected for, then they should not hold that office.
Well, you make very eloquent points there. And before I turn to the ISIS subject, there are two really very recent developments here, and I'd like your advice thereon. First of all, I noticed, and I'm just noticing this now, perhaps it had been written earlier in the media, but that is that Putin continues to really adopt a very aggressive position towards the United States. And people were noticing in the current development on July 4th,
the bombers.
Long-range Russian Tu-95 Bear-H bombers capable of carrying the nuclear bombers approached both the Alaskan coastline and also the North American coast off Carolina. They did not fly into our territory, but were sufficiently close there too. They were intercepted by U.S. F-22 fighter jets. Well, CNN says F-22. I also thought I saw an F-15 reference to intercepting pilots being sent by our Americans. And they're mentioning, Tom, on this that one of the Russian pilots to American pilots off the north coast of California, it was July 4th, had a greeting regarding Independence Day which similarly echoed a message sent from Putin that very day to Obama. Now, one could say that perhaps it could be translated as just a formal July 4th greeting, but people don't think that. They think that it's really a bullying attempt.
I would tend to agree with that. I think that Vladimir Putin is, without a doubt, one of the most dangerous individuals on the international stage at this point. And part of the reason that has occurred is that let's face this. Okay, he has an advantage over our European allies as far as the distribution of oil from Russia. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I have been researching and I think should be proposed is that with America's natural gas dominance, excuse me, why can't we support our European allies and make up for their need for energy, and take that plume out of Putin's cap? It would take the influence that he has over our European allies away, and it would help us with our exports. It would help us with our economy, and it would help us bridge a gap with our European allies that at times in recent years has been on a tense footing. Putin is toying with us. He's done things that have resurrected Cold War animosities and tensions. And all of this started, of course, with the Crimea and his dalliance there in Central Asia. And he has increased his military budget by 70%. And these are deep concerns of mine. We as Americans are war-weary after Afghanistan and Iraq. I get that. But what Americans need to understand and need to accept is that if we will continue to be the preeminent superpower on this planet and the global peacemaker, shall we say, not the global policeman, but the defender of democracy in this planet, then we're going to have a strong military. Now, our military budget, the one that has just been released, outspends the other top 13 countries combined. However, our military budget is not spending it smart because we have politicians on Capitol Hill that are paying for and are legislating funding for military projects that the military itself says it doesn't want and it doesn't need. And the reason they're doing that is because they are pilfering projects into their congressional districts to satisfy special interests. And I think that's wrong, and that needs to be taken care of. Putin is testing us. I mean, with the bombers coming that close on July 4th, he is trying to see how far he can get. He's doing the same thing in Eastern Europe. And he and the Chinese and the Indians are developing a new form of supersonic weapons. And this is not something that you're hearing very much of in the press. But if you read the strategic and military journals, you'll know that the Chinese just did their fourth test of a supersonic missile that can go 7,400 miles an hour, which means it could be here before we have time to launch. We only spend in the defense budget that's just coming out for 2015, we are spending $20 million on maintenance of our nuclear system out of a budget of $608 billion. That's outrageous. We're falling behind, and we need to do it in a much smarter way. I hope I didn't sidestep what your main question was. I tried to address it.
Those are brilliant points, Tom. And pardon me, I had left the room for 1 second. I have a wonderful little cat who tends to be very noisy, pardon me. But I caught most of those points. They are superb. Well,
Thank you.
As well, I like the idea as well of your have the United States offered alternatives to sources of energy for the European Union. This is probably off on a tangent, but what did you think about the veto by President Obama of the Keystone XL pipeline that did receive bipartisan support?
It did receive bipartisan support, but let's look at the details of it. I kind of supported the president's veto of it. You had the right wing saying that it would create thousands of jobs. When you looked at the details, once the infrastructure was created for the pipeline, there would only be a requirement of approximately, I believe it was between 80 and 120 permanent jobs from that project. Secondly, all of the oil that would be flowing out of Canada would be flowing through the United States to our southern ports and then exported by Canada. We would not get any of that oil. We would not get any of the export revenue from that oil. So what good does it help us here in the United States? And it is, in my opinion, part of a corporate strategy by some of the extremely large multinational oil companies to transfer their ability or transfer their profits from one country to another and still not have to pay taxes on it here in the United States because of the high tax rate. Now, the interesting part about it is they would drill the oil in Canada. We would build the pipeline. They would ship it through the pipeline to our southern ports, and then they would export it to other countries. They would make the profit on it for exports and wouldn't have to pay taxes on it in the United States. And because they sold it abroad, they would get a tax credit for profit from it because it was being sold abroad. And that helps them with the tax loopholes. So please, someone show me where this would have helped the American economy.
I was hoping that the great ports of Louisiana, New Orleans might have benefited, and also they were mentioning a connection there with jobs for Texas. But you don't think that it would have been it wouldn't have merited the great resources used, or also the
I think it would have been
sort of environmental engagement there. Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been short-term, Patrice. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think that the environmental questions were heavily looked at, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think that there was definitely reason to seriously question the validity of it, but I did not see any evidence that the environmental impact would have been detrimental enough to outweigh the project. My concern about the project was there was so much rhetoric about what good it was going to do the American economy that was put out by the oil and gas industry and by the right wing of the Republican Party, whose big oil's got their hands in their pockets with contributions for their campaigns, that the American people were not hearing the reality of the story. The Canadian oil companies would have made the money. Our companies would have made money through their subsidiaries by selling it abroad, and it would have gone through the American pipeline that we would have built that would have created immediate jobs for the short term. But once the pipeline's built, those jobs are virtually erased because all you have to do is maintenance, and the jobs that would have been created in Louisiana and Texas ports would not have been substantial enough to warrant the creation of the pipeline. I think it was a boondoggle of a distraction.
I think, I know I've been pretty silent throughout this whole interview, but it's more or less, I feel like I'm in poli-sci, or, I'm receiving so much information. But with processing that, and to add to this conversation at this point, would you have any hopes, or how do you feel or view the recent Cuban efforts that have been made in terms of our countries now, at least being back on speaking terms. Do you see any improvement with the economy for both sides there?
Pernell, that's an excellent question. The Obama administration is propping up their decision to reopen diplomatic relations with Cuba as a way to help the Cuban people and the increase of American economic flows into Cuba. Excuse me. I do see that potential. I understand the traditional sentiments of Cuban refugees in Florida and their opposition to the Castro regime. I personally have had friends whose parents escaped Cuba during the 50s and the 60s. I understand, I feel for them, and I agree with them. However, having said that, the embargo on Cuba for the last 50 years hasn't been working. It's done nothing but hurt the Cuban economy. Everybody else in the world does business with Cuba, but the United States doesn't. So I don't see what harm we were actually putting on the regime for ideological purposes. So I agree with Obama. If the policy hasn't worked, let's try something different. Now, having said that, I think there needs to be a diplomatic push for the Castro regime to be less autocratic and dictatorial. We need to really push them. If they want to keep open relations with the United States and they want American business and industry to flow into Cuba, then they're going to have to give on human rights, and they're going to have to give on civil rights. And that's where the quid pro quo comes in. And there's not been enough issues made about that. I think that's where America can have a great deal of influence on the Castro administration and on the Cuban economy. Is we can hold that carrot over their head and say, look, if you want our businesses and you want our industries to come flowing into Cuba, you're going to have to make some, you're going to have to give here on civil rights and on human rights. And be less dictatorial, and you're going to have to open up and be more democratic and have some free elections. I think we have the ability to have that kind of influence over them.
Well, Tom, and I don't mean to be facetious, but, you know, America, it seems to me they have these same issues that they want to go somewhere else and try to fix. I mean, we got human rights issues and civil rights issues right here, some of which you've already covered with tonight's interview. And don't you feel like, you know, charity begins at home?
It does. I agree with you completely, Fernell, completely. We have problems. This country has the highest incarceration rate in the world. And it is unfair when you consider that you have a large number of minority people in prison that are in prison either for minor, non-violent infractions because of the mandatory sentencing structure that was put in place during the 80s and the 90s. That needs to be completely reviewed, overhauled, and rewritten. We have civil liberties issues, as it was fully demonstrated in South Carolina, and that is going throughout the South. And, you know, I've written about this in my blog. I say, look, okay,
yes.
You have this country used to be predominantly white, predominantly middle class, predominantly elderly, with their generational prejudices, okay? And I say that in all due respect. I'm not trying to demean those things, as they have every right to feel the way they feel. However, diversity in this country is rapidly changing. And America, if we are going to be a more perfect union, we need to address these issues. we need to get over them, and we need to progress. And I was so glad that the Confederate battle flag came down in South Carolina. However, I agree with one of my colleagues who says it was a huge distraction, and it really was not addressing the issues that need to be addressed in this country. And
I agree with your colleague.
Yes, it was a media circus, and it's not really addressing the issues that need to be addressed at local community levels. And these are the things we need to be talking about. We don't need to be talking about a flag flying somewhere. We need to be talking about how the economy is affecting people when you have double-digit unemployment rates in the African-American community and in minority communities, when you have the high incarceration rate in this country, and the education of the poor education that is based on a property tax structure where rich, schools get all of the books and they get all of the good teachers, and other schools do not. I think that's a violation of what the Supreme Court was trying to do with this desegregation of the schools. I think that's something that needs to be revisited. It's a conversation this country needs to be having with itself. And I don't see that it's a conversation that we're having. And that doesn't mean that we have to be sitting across the table from each other with guns pointed at each other, or we need to be beating each other over the head. We need to be sitting down and working through our differences and coming up with compromising solutions that will have concrete answers for real people.
Well, Tom, this has been very informative, but again, we've come full circle, and I still would like to know why would it be necessary for Cuba to, change their ways and whatever it is they do with their human rights or whatever. Like you said, it's been 50 years, and they still was getting along, without our spaghetti, us apparently without their cigars. So now that, things are back together again, we don't have to do this on the black market, so to speak. Why do they need to conform in any way for us to just carry on and do what the rest of the world has been doing?
I would tend to agree with you for now. You make a very good, engaging point. What difference does it make if we change the policy now? I agree with you. And why should America, as some of our Latin American neighbors would like to call us, the big gringos, why should we listen to America when America is having its own civil liberties problems? Isn't that hypocritical? And I would tend to agree with that analysis. However, there are studies and there is evidence to indicate that an influx of American tourism, industry, and business could dramatically help the everyday Cuban people, and in essence could create a flourishing of economic freedom in that country that they've not had. It's been dominated by the Castro regime and their autocracy, that we might be able to help influence that. Now, I'll grant you, because we've not been there for 50 years, we've got no proof that that will happen. But I think it's worth trying to see if we can make a foothold there and see if we can create some influence there. If it doesn't work, well, then we try something else. International relations and international politics is not a game of white and black. It's not a game of stereotypes that we can just whack-a-mole like so many other things that we tend to do. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And you have to have career diplomats who know what they're doing, who are educated in the cultural, political, economic relations of differing countries, to be able to walk us through the different diplomatic approaches for each country and each region. And this is one of the things I'm going to be arguing about with our education system. We are being so focused on our students being engineers and scientists that we're not focusing on them being well-rounded. We are not having a well-rounded education system, and I bring that full circle because I had a well-rounded education. Now, granted, my mental outlook and the way my brain works, I was not a math person. I was not a science person. I was a social sciences person. So I am a bit biased in that area. However, how can we possibly deal with foreign countries if we don't have experienced, well-educated diplomats that come up through our education system to do the diplomacy and do the negotiations that need to be done? Are you there? Something happened. I'm going to hang up. You call me back.
Hello, Joe. Can you hear me? Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Teresa. Hold on.
Please pardon me. That was my error.
Hold on. Damn.
Do you still think it's appropriate that the flag be flown in such public places as perhaps State House, museums, other areas where there are really effective warrior capabilities could be acknowledged? I know Massachusetts has a hall of flags, if I remember correctly, in their State House to show the different brave units. Also, I remember at West Point there is a building there with one of the oh heavens, what would you call it? The top of the ceiling has all the battles of the Civil War, of the war between the states emblazoned on it. So we mustn't forget that there was some really very, very brave warfare that occurred there with both the Southern military and, of course, the Northern.
I agree. And we have to be extremely careful not to we have to be careful not to cross the line, okay? I agreed with the battle flag, the Confederate battle flag, coming off of the grounds of the state capitol in South Carolina. The reason that I disagreed with that was because this is the people's house, okay, for all South Carolinians. Now, when people start talking about renaming schools and changing sports titles, mascots, and erasing memorabilia from the Civil War from museums and things of that nature, I think we're crossing the line. We're doing what we so often in America tend to do, is we go from one extreme to the other, and that's not appropriate. I think what we need to do is we need to find the situation where if you're flying something that is discriminatory on the state grounds of an institution that is supposed to be for all the people, then that's not appropriate. Now, if you have a museum or you have a school that is supposed to be for all people as well, there's nothing wrong with putting up memorials, there's nothing wrong with putting up museum pieces that not necessarily celebrate history, but lest we forget what happened. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that, you know, we have to be very careful not to cross the line. There was this raging outrage, you know, for Confederate flag supporters saying that, you know, this is a symbol of our heritage, not of hate. Well, I can understand how they would feel that way, but they're not grasping that for many people it was a symbol of hate. And the fact that it was flying over the state capitol was the problem. Now, obviously, this is something that affects millions of people, because you have corporations today that are removing these items from the shelves of their stores. I don't know that that's appropriate either. I mean, because, it may be offensive, but it's like something that's offensive on television. If you don't like it, change the channel. If you don't want to buy it in a Walmart, then don't buy it. It doesn't mean that the store supports racism. It doesn't mean that a corporation is racist because it has these items as symbols of history of history in our country on their shelves. It just
I agree, Tom. I mean, I feel that way too. I mean, your statement that it was in the wrong place at the wrong time is what it mattered at that time. Not for them to take down every statue and, you know, discontinue sale, you know, tear the car up, you know, all that wasn't asked for. They simply did not want to have to share that type of a flag in front. Besides that, there are flag laws. You really cannot fly. That flag did not belong to anybody. It did not belong to South Carolina. It did not belong to any state. It was not a state flag. It was not a city flag. It is a flag of history, okay? So if you look up the guidelines for that, but my further purpose to say is that, no, we don't want them to tear, you know, America down with all of their statues or whatever they have. All we're saying is that if, you know, as a black person, if I see one of my friends invites me to dinner and they got, you know, flags like that in their window or whatever, I know I'm going to get the heck out of there. I just know myself. All black people go, no, that ain't where you want to be. You're not going to stop at a bar or, you know, go to a club or anything that has, you know, the flag up. That's like a Jewish person going into a place that, you know, has a swastika. We know that.
Exactly. Well, you know, I was on a radio interview a couple of weeks ago. When I was a little boy, I was very much into flags. I've always been into flags, and I tell this story. My cousins from Mississippi were coming into town, and as a way to, it was a 4th of July weekend, and as a way to welcome them, I got a whole roll of paper towels, and I opened my World Book Encyclopedia. I'm showing my age here, World Book Encyclopedia, I know. But I opened the page.
White with the gold emblem?
Actually, it was red with gold. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You had an update.
Yeah, I had the red books, you know. Anyway, I opened to the flag page, and I used my magic markers, and I started drawing flags on the paper towels, and I broke off sticks from the tree, and I had the entire front yard covered in flags. Well, at one point, I was drawing a flag, and my grandfather walked in, and he immediately snatched it up out of my hands and said, "You will not fly that in this yard, in my house. That is wrong." And I didn't understand why. It was a Nazi flag. I was 4 or 5 years old, okay? I didn't know. But he made that point to me. It was a point of distinction. There are some things that are so distasteful and have such a bad mark in history that...
And that brings me to my final point, Tom, not to cut you off, but that display when President Obama went there, of all of those people standing out front with the, I think it was just maybe about 15 or 20, so it wasn't a lot of them, but about 15 or 20 people stood there with the Confederate flag, to oppose that. To me, was the most insulting thing that they could have ever done. I mean,
and I agree with you.
I
agree with you
completely.
Heart.
It really did.
Well, and you know what? You're not the only one that felt that way, Fresnel. And that brings to point that, okay, you may have a right to fly it on your own property, but you do not have a right to demand that it be flown at the people's house. And like you said, if you've been invited to someone's house and you see that in the window, you and I both are not going there, okay? We choose not to go there. It's just something that we don't agree with. And that's one of the great things about this country. We can agree to disagree. But when it comes to public property that is supposed to be the people's house, it shouldn't be there. I mean, let's face it, okay? Robert E. Lee's estate is on the hill overlooking Arlington Cemetery.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They don't fly the Confederate battle flag there. So, I mean, you know.
Brilliant military mind, brilliant military strategist. Well, I think this is really a fascinating discussion. Do we still have time to talk about your great article on ISIS and also briefly the Iranian nuclear agreement?
Sure. If y'all still want to carry on, we can do that. Not a problem.
Well, before we segue into that, did we have a caller on the line? Ben or one of our guests that are in the studio? No?
I know I had called in after I had disconnected there by accident. Pardon me.
Oh, okay.
That might be the reference. Well, the article, Tom's article, calls for a comprehensive strategy against ISIS. You mentioned how about the ICAI as a new acronym. We do have a multinational coalition against them, but I like your idea very, very much. You also present very interesting points about ISIS that needs to be made. First of all, you mentioned that there's no legitimacy to that concept of state or caliphate. It shouldn't be equated with a recognized national state entity. Brilliant point. And also, of course, there are crimes being against humanity, as indeed they are, as against international law. And just it's a wonderfully powerful, powerful piece. Now, Tom, too, you have a very strong YouTube video. I believe it's called The Real Face of ISIS.
Yes.
I very much like the intent behind that unfortunately the world media really isn't meeting the challenge of countering the tremendously false propaganda of ISIS, and unfortunately, not many, but some members of the younger generation now are called to follow the ISIS cause, which is indeed truly horrific. Could you tell us more about your reasons for this article, the ICAI as you see it? Very good points.
Well, the reason I wrote the blog and the reason let me focus first on your third point about the video I did, the real face of ISIS. I did that video. The strong incentive behind that was because despite calls by the Obama administration and the creation of a specific department or a specific section of the intelligence community and the State Department to fight ISIS on the World Wide Web, on social media, I have seen no evidence that they've done anything. Maybe it's out there. Maybe the tens of millions of dollars that they supposedly have spent is being spent correctly. But to be honest with you, I see no evidence on social media that they've done anything to counter ISIS's marketing campaign. So I went and created my own video called The Real Face of ISIS. And the reason I created it is because I wanted young people to see, okay, this is what these people really do, okay? It is graphic in detail. I took all of that off the internet, and I left nothing. There are images there of homosexuals being thrown off building tops. There are images of Christians being crucified in the town square. There are images of people being beheaded, of being burned alive. There are images of women and children being massacred. There are images. All of this is there because I think if you deny the reality that these things exist, and I understand mass media's journalistic integrity for not showing things as too graphic. I get that. But on social media, we're not fighting them on even ground, and we need to do more. And I did this video because I, as a private citizen, thought, well, if they're not doing it out there, and you can find it on YouTube. It's called The Real Face of ISIS.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, I think that we're not doing enough. Now, Americans are war-weary. They do not want boots on the ground. I get that. But when you talk to every military strategist and anybody of credible strategic policy, they tell you that there is no way that ISIS is going to be defeated by an air campaign. We've proven that for now 16 to 18 months. It's not done enough good. My proposal that will be coming out next month is I am proposing that we create 8 different special forces units, and that we deploy them in various places throughout the region. I am proposing that one be that we negotiate with our allies for their deployment, and they be deployed in Iraq, they be deployed in Jordan, they be deployed in Turkey, they be deployed in Egypt, they be deployed in Tunisia, they be deployed in 2 of them would be deployed on our warships in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and they would coordinate together because they would have a multitude of services or mission statements. One is they would be with the countries or allies. They would work with their countries' special operations forces to help train them, because we have the best special operations forces in the world. I give a great deal of credit to our men and women in uniform, and I have a great deal of respect for them. But we're not using them to the smartest and fullest extent of their capabilities. So these 8 units would be strategically deployed. It would not require a massive invasion like we did in Iraq. It would not require anything but the support of our allies. It would give our allies the distinct feeling that America does have skin in the game on this. We're not just relying on them and their people to die in this cause, but we've got a stake in the game here, and we're helping them fight this enemy in their own backyard. So that's one of the things I propose. And yes, you're right. We do have, quote-unquote, 60 nations in our coalition. But to be honest with you, I don't see evidence. There was news this week that Turkey is seriously considering allowing us to use one of their air bases, and that was because several of their diplomats were kidnapped, and then you had that suicide bomb in the border town, the Turkish-Syrian border town, where they went into a market. They had an ice truck, and they did it on a festival the last day of Ramadan, and they invited women and children to come and get ice, and they blew it up. They killed men, women, and children. Families were there in the market. Now, if this is not an example of evil in our world, I do not know what is. And as Americans, we need to stand up and say, we don't agree with this. We're not going to tolerate this. But the thing we have to remember is the one thing ISIS wants more than anything else is they want us to invade. They want us. They have said from the beginning they want to take on American troops, and they want to fight them in large land-scale battles. That is the worst thing that we could do, is to do what Senator Lindsey Graham wants to do, and several of the other Republicans, is put 10 or 15,000 troops on the ground in Iraq to fight them. We can't do that. That's what they want us to do, and it will alienate us with our allies and other peoples in the region. What we need to do is be more smart and more strategic in our military policy in dealing with these people. These are renegades. These are terrorists, and they need to be fought in that manner.
I agree. I thought at one point that airport situation was, I thought it was on the table. Did it just go away or not happen with Turkey?
What's that?
Us being able to use their airways or airport.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was not an option until recently this week. Turkey did not want to run the risk that they would be a target because they had American troops operating out of their air bases. But as of the last 10 days, they're already a target. ISIS has specifically, exactly, and that is what has brought around the Turkish government. They've also had a change of power with their most recent election, and I think the outrage of the Turkish people has encouraged the Turkish government to reevaluate their position on this. So this would be extremely invaluable because Turkey has the largest military in the region and the best trained and the best equipped. That would be an ideal partner in striking a blow at the heart of ISIS in Syria.
Well, those are very innovative points there as far as strategic military intervention, though I also often agree with Senator Lindsey Graham. He has a wonderful mind there, as do you, regarding international and foreign policy. I saw something yesterday that is a further testament to why your video is very, very appropriate, particularly at this time. Yesterday on Fox News, it was entitled, Islamic State Bigger Threat Than Al-Qaeda, FBI Chief Says, and quoting directly, because they're very important quotes. These are from FBI Director James Comey. The Islamic State terror group's effort to inspire troubled Americans to extremism is a greater threat to the U.S. than an external attack from Al-Qaeda, the FBI director said Wednesday. Also, Director Comey was saying that they are finding that on social media sites, ISIS is urging Muslims who can't travel to the Middle Eastern region to instead aim to, quote, kill where you are. Also, he's referencing the fact that unlike Al-Qaeda, ISIS is trying to generate the interest and cooperation, conspiratorial attacks from, in conjunction with ISIS goals from people who are not stable. Apparently, Al-Qaeda looked for recruits who were stable. ISIS, though, is not following that particular strategy. So your very informative video will be a great blessing to any young people who might want to follow that horrible ISIS cause. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I thank you very much, and I agree with FBI Director Comey's analysis. I think it's long overdue that we finally have one of our major anti-terrorist leaders finally stating the reality of the situation. But it is long overdue. This should have been said 6 months ago when we had journalists that were being beheaded. This should have been said 8 months ago when, or even 2 months ago when Yemen fell apart and we were forced to close our embassy and evacuate our people. These are things. ISIS is completely different from Al-Qaeda, completely different. This is a whole new ballgame, and they're using social media against us. They are very tech savvy, and part of the reason that I think we are not doing more is because we are fighting it old school style. We're leaving their Twitter accounts and their social media accounts open, hoping that we can follow them and it will lead us to them, okay? But they're using encryption. They're using modern-day encryption techniques that it makes this impossible. And I wouldn't be surprised if ISIS's tech-savvy divisions are part of the individuals hacking into our infrastructure.
Exactly.
And that's a scary thought. I mean, I expect it from the Chinese and the Russians. Tom,
further to that, there was and I think he was a top agent in the FBI that made mention of the fact that we were not able to decipher heavy encryption, which I thought, oh my God, why is he saying that? You know, I mean, why would you just, you know?
Thank you. Why would you tell them that out loud?
Hello.
It's funny. You saw the reports this week of President Obama going to Kenya, right?
Yes.
And the Kenyan government released the arrival and departure dates of Air Force One.
I noticed that the news reporter reporting that got real skeptical as he was reading it because I guess there was a lot of information in there that he knew he shouldn't be saying, you know, over the air. And if you notice, he just kind of fumbled through that report to say, well, he's on his way to Kenya right now, you know.
You know, it's like you unlock your front door, you open it, and you put a sign out in front that says, here's the combination to my safe, this is where I keep my weapons, and this is when I will be gone. Please come and rob me, okay? I mean, you don't give away all of your strategy, and you don't announce your weaknesses and your techniques for trying to figure out what they're doing. That's stupid,
yes,
in my opinion.
Well, that's how they've gotten the upper hand. I mean, I know a lot of it is old school, and it's going to take a lot to come around to this new age thinking, but I also believe that these kids that they have in school that have no way of getting a job once they get out, they ought to have a sector on just, you know, fighting terrorism. They need to initiate some new classes for all these people going to school, DeVry Institute, whatever they're learning technology, terrorism, encryption, and all of that should be part of the training. Because
you know, for now, that's an excellent idea. I have not heard that proposed yet, but you know what? I'm going to do some research on that for my education position paper. I like that idea. Thank you. I like that. See, that's one of the reasons I'm running is I'm trying to get people. I'm saying, look, I don't have all the answers. Throw me some information. Throw me your ideas. Let's get it out there together. That's what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to get the American people to do, is to think for themselves, just like you said. You just came up with that idea. That's a wonderful idea. Now,
well,
did you see
NASA is offering these kids $100 if they can draw the robot that they want to use on the next space expedition to our newfound cousin planet. But $100 is not enough incentive. But I've seen these kids. I've taken several graphic artist program classes at these colleges. These kids are fantastic. fantastic. All they need is some direction. And they could probably solve a lot of the problems. But no, these people want to stay in control, and they just like the Snowden guy. He was, a little bit ahead of all of them, which is why he picked up on what was going on, And look what he had to go through.
Exactly. Well, you saw the 18-year-old in Washington State just this week that had the drone that he built that fired a pistol.
Yes, yes.
I'm sitting here going, okay, you got 18-year-olds that are building drones that can fire handguns, and we no longer have vocational training in our schools for our kids.
Well, they want to stop them from even being able to write or read cursive. How many historical documents are they not going to be able to read? I mean, what's going to happen? I don't understand it,
I don't either. That's one of the reasons I have problems with Common Core education, okay? I love the ideas that were originally endorsed behind Common Core. There were some great academics, some great philosophers and theorists that came up with the idea of national standards for education. However, like so many things that the government does, they have taken it overboard, and now our teachers are not teachers anymore. They are basically test instructors. This is what it's going to take for you to pass the test. Memorize this, and they're not teaching anymore. They're not learning anymore.
But it's a little bit disparaging, Tom. In some schools, they are still teaching it. And I don't want to play any kind of card again, but it's the lower class schools, minorities, Latinos, blacks, that those curriculums have just been abolished like they never existed. But in the white schools, they are still learning cursive.
See, and that is unacceptable. And I agree with you, Fernell, that part of the problem with our education system is that we have gone from one extreme to the other. Where we no longer reward teachers that are good teachers. We keep them in. They have automatic. What do they call it? Tenure.
Yes.
Because of years of service. But it has nothing to do with the quality of their abilities to teach.
Well, Patrice is an ESL teacher, and she can tell you there are just tons of people who want to know the English language that are being tutored
around the world on that. Yes, indeed. Well, that Student Success Act as well would be great. I think it features a requirement there, if I'm not mistaken, for courses that would really help the students to be very strong graduates in this 21st century. Those are very good points, Vernell and Tom.
Yeah,
we need to have first class education.
Well, and when you consider our education system used to be number 1 in the world and it's now 17th. And that's conservative on some standards, okay?
Yes.
It could very well be worse on other statistics and studies. And that's scary.
It is indeed. Mm-hmm. It is indeed. Well, now, Tom, are we going to see a great essay regarding the Iran nuclear agreement? I know we have that Iran nuclear review agreement in place. Really interesting articles today. I know Fox News had one, from Wednesday, entitled House Speaker John Boehner vowed Wednesday to do everything possible to stop a newly struck Iran nuclear deal. End quote. I guess the exact title, Boehner vows fight to scuttle Iran nuclear deal. The United Nations does approve of it. Many people, including Boehner, think that Congress deserves really a full explanation, all the details by the president. Apparently, now Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas and Representative Mike Pompeo of Kansas, both Republicans, and here I'm quoting the article directly, said in a statement Tuesday that they learned from the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, that 2 side deals between Iran and the IAEA will remain secret from Congress and the public, end quote. Well, that's an interesting point from this article. It doesn't sound as though it's being as transparently presented as it should. What do you think?
In support of that, I also heard that too, Patrice, with CNN reporting that 2 of the senators said that if they were elected, they would repeal whatever agreement is made.
That's a good idea.
Yes, and I have problems with the deal as it is now. You know, here's another example. You and I, we all talked earlier about the Democrats thinking that they needed to elect Hillary as the automatic nominee because she's the most likely person to be the first woman president. Here we have a similar example of the Obama administration putting so much emphasis and putting so much stock on having to make a deal that they may not have negotiated properly and stringently enough to get the best deal. Now, one of my problems with this deal is, I'm sorry, we've got 4 Americans still languishing.
Hello.
We've got 4 Americans still languishing in Iranian prisons. Now, I'm sorry. I cannot honestly believe that diplomacy on a nuclear deal is not affected by the influence of those 4 prisoners in Iranian prisons.
Right.
That's a problem for me. Secondly, yes, there were reports this week that the UN Atomic Energy Commission was making side deals. Now, Secretary Kerry addressed those earlier in the week, and I'm not fully satisfied by his responses. I'm also not fully satisfied by the fact that this deal, it does have some very good points. I agree with President Obama that it does stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon this year or the next, okay? I agree with that because it does wipe out, I believe it's 89% of their centrifuges. No, it's 98% of their centrifuges. It wipes out 98% of their fission fuel material. I understand that. But the promises that the administration made when they went into this negotiating process, that there would be 7-day, 24-hour immediate inspections, have not been fulfilled. Now, I understand from a negotiating and a diplomatic procedure, the United States wouldn't agree to that either. There are very few countries in the world that would agree to that. So I understand that. But 24 days as your time frame, that is not acceptable. So I understand Congress's apprehension about this deal.
Yeah.
And my concern is that this is what, if I were in Congress today, my solution would be this. I would say, look, all right, I'll vote for the deal. However, before I vote yes for this deal, Iran's going to have to let go of my 4 prisoners.
As a good faith gesture.
If you want us to vote for this deal, let our people come home. Period.
Yeah, I agree totally. It should be, I mean, even, kidnappers got to give you a good faith suggestion. I mean, we need to know they're alive and okay. We can't even see them. We can't do anything. So my feeling is that they have a past history of reneging on all of their agreements with the UN. So, I mean, they are just vying for time to hurry up and get it completed without us coming in to check on them. You know what I'm saying?
Good summation. And there's no really possibility of a truly accurate verification. So
exactly.
It's a very dangerous agreement.
Now, ladies, I'll be the first to admit, I am an internationalist, okay? I believe in diplomacy. I believe in international negotiation. I believe in sitting down at the table with your quote-unquote enemies and trying to work through your problems, okay? However, when they have our people in their prisons and there is no effort, as Vernell said, good faith effort to produce them as an incentive for us to make a good deal with them, no, I'm sorry. Then it's time to walk away from the table.
Very well said, and they certainly don't follow the accepted norms of international law. I loved international law myself, and excellent points. I really enjoyed this discussion here on the Iranian deal and all the other topics. I thought we really had a wide spectrum of exchange tonight. I learned a great deal.
Yes, Tom, would you mind sending me a CLE certificate?
I'm sorry, send you a what? Send you a what?
Continual legal education certificate.
Right.
Oh, you're too sweet, Vernell. Thank you. By the way, I just got a notice from my media marketing representative on the West Coast, Vernell, and he wants you and Patrice to be on his show.
Sure.
So after we get finished here, we'll have to. We need to chat about that because he's interested in having you on his show. So.
Great.
Thank you for relaying that news. And, Tom, I want to again mention to our readers that your website, tomufert.com, has excellent essays. The YouTube material there is excellent as well. Also for our listeners to keep an eye out for the soon-to-be-posted tomufert.org website for Tom's position papers on the important issues, including foreign policy.
It's going to be up next month, and also starting in September, my radio talk show, Tom's Take, will be going on once a week. Right now, it's on twice a month on the APRI Broadcasting Network. I have to do a shout-out for them. We're going to start moving it in September up to once a week. And I wanted to give a shout-out to a group of people on Google because they are a wonderful group of people. They're called Sensible Politics, and they have chapters all across the country. I wanted to put a word out for them. And here's the other thing. I want to put just a plug in. Next week, I will be doing my first Google Town Hall Hangout, and we are directing it towards voters in New Hampshire. And we're giving voters the opportunity to call in or to notify us via the Internet, live messaging, to talk with me as a presidential candidate. I want to hear what concerns my fellow voters. I want to know, give them the opportunity to ask me direct questions like you ladies have done tonight, because that's the whole point of this effort that we're doing with the None of the Above campaign. And we're starting out with New Hampshire this month. Then we're going to be going to Iowa, and we're going to do one every month, maybe even twice a month. But
you start with the hard stuff first, huh?
I'm telling you, yeah. But people will be able to respond on Google Hangouts, and we're going to do Twitter Hangouts as well. And because I'm disabled and I can't travel because I don't have the money to travel like Mr. Trump does in his big old plane, I want to give the voters the opportunity to reach out to me personally, and I want to be able to respond to their questions and their concerns. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, that sounds wonderful, and we wish you all the best. And Patrice is an excellent ghostwriter, so I'm sure she'd be willing to volunteer with your campaign in any way she can help out. She doesn't like to rest. She just loves to stay busy.
Well, and Vernell, you've got some great ideas. I want to sit and chat with you. I like your ideas you had on education. That was
Tom,
just,
you don't have time for me right now.
Oh, yes,
very innovative. I agree. Very, very innovative. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I'll make time. Trust me, I'll make time. Those are some great ideas. See,
well, we certainly have enjoyed having you back again as our speaker, and you will come back again.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Hopefully these town hall meetings will prompt you to come back and give us an idea. Maybe you'll, for whatever reason, you could be up there in the high ratings, It just all depends on how many hearts you can touch.
And Tom, next month we could discuss the new material at that tomufert.org website on your platform. We really would be honored.
Thank you. I will definitely get that out to you as soon as we get it finished. The website is being created as we speak. The content work is being done, and we're hoping to have it finished by, if not early, mid-August. And people can go there. They can see what the campaign is all about. They can get T-shirts and stuff like that. And if they want to donate, they feel confident enough to donate money for our efforts, they can do that as well. We're going to have all that set up, and we're very pleased with the company that's doing it, and the designers. They're doing an excellent job. And I have to get a shout out to all of my campaign staff out there that are helping, and my friends. Y'all are all wonderful, and I appreciate the support. I could not be doing this without all of you helping me, so thank you.
Tom, thank you again. It was an honor to interview you this evening. You're, I believe, a blessing to the nation. Truly, a citizen candidate. Now, Vernell, any final words?
No, thank you again, Tom. We've enjoyed you immensely this evening.
I thank you very much for your detailed and insightful questions and your wonderful conversations. I will be back, and I will make sure that my people get in touch with y'all, because I'm getting message after message how interested they are in getting contact with y'all. So we'll definitely get that connection set up. God bless y'all both, and thank you very much for having me the opportunity. Okay?
Indeed,
take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bye-bye.
Tomorrow has already started, and tomorrow...
And joining us tonight, we have an undefeated world champion.
Get up, you good-for-nothing lazy.
Morning, beautiful.
Oh, didn't you forget something?